a little bit and remember where we're at. So basically, after the rabbi explained to the king of the different levels in nature, the world, the way, whether you like it or not everybody is the same. There's stages, there's levels, there's stones, and there's plants. Plants are a new existence. No matter how much you try to develop a stone, it will not become a plant. A plant reproduces, a plant eats, drinks, grows, develops. It won't happen with a stone.
Yeah, I've been talking to my stone for years.
Your stone will never turn into a plant. And the same way, a plant will never be an animal that has a personality. And an animal will never be a human being that has a intellect and that has the ability to think and talk and it's a sgula. It's inherent value that each level of creation has that expands on what was before and is a new existence. And then the king, and then he asked the king, okay, is there anything above a human being? So the king says, yes, there's a genius. A genius is like a phenomenon. It's something like you can't believe it. How could a person, a human being, know all these books by heart and have knowledge that's incredible? And the rabbi says, no. The rabbi says, no, you didn't understand me. That's not a difference. It's like I'm saying to you, a table is a piece of wood with 4 legs. And what about a piece of stone with 3 legs? Is that a table? Yeah, it's a table. So that's not a difference that's a smart person or a stupid person. But it's not a new creation like we said from animal to plant or stone to plant. It's something it's the same thing. It's just a very advanced human. So he says, okay, so there's nothing, the king says there's nothing beyond a human in this world. And then the rabbi says, well, what if I tell you that there's a person who could walk into fire, not eat, not sleep, that can, and not only does he not eat and not sleep, his face is beaming, like beaming. Usually a person doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. He becomes weak. One day we don't eat or drink and we can't function. But this person is made out of a different material. His face beams so much that you need to cover it with a mask because you can't look at it. It's a different material. It's beyond every level of existence. And this person, when he wants to die, and he never gets sick and he never gets weak. And when he wants to die, it's like going to sleep. He knows when he's going to die. He tells everybody, listen, in a year from now, at this time, I'm going to die, so let me close up some things that I have to tell you. The whole book of Dvarim is Moshe Rabbeinu. And the whole book is him, the last things I want to give over, the last message before I die. And at this day, this time, Zayin Adar, I'm going to lie down, go to sleep, get a kiss, and I'm going to die. And he also knows everything that happened before him and everything that's going to happen in the future. Would you agree this person is not a person? It's something new. It's something different. It's like the difference between a stone and a plant, an animal and a human. He says 100%. If this exists, then you're talking about an angel. You're talking about something godly. I don't know that it exists. You say it does. But if there was something like that, I would agree with you that this is definitely a new creation. That is our prophet Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the example of what every Jew is. The Jewish people, we keep getting stronger. We live. Every nation comes and goes like That's what Shaul said to Shmuel after he. Shmuel said to Shaul after he sinned. He says, "Netzach Yisrael lo yinachem velo yishaker ki lo adam hu linachem." The eternity of the Jewish people will be forever because it's not like a human being. Nations are like human beings. They have a certain time where they're born, they live, and then they die. And that's the natural state of the world. The same way human beings are born and die, nations born and are born and they die, and that's normal. But the Jewish people are not. We live forever, and Moshe Rabbeinu was that one person who maximized the potential as a Jew. He is the prototype. He is the example of what the Jewish nation is. He is the mirror of ourselves. And nobody, says the rabbi, nobody argues with the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu existed and that everything about him is true. So from all of these discussions, all of these how do you say, descriptions of Moshe Rabbeinu, the king asked a question about Moshe Rabbeinu, the historian. What was the question? You have a calculation of the creation of the world? And the rabbi says, sure we do. The world begins, as far as we're concerned, the Moshe Rabbeinu, once he told us the history, he told us way back. He went back to the beginning of creation, how God created the world. And then we calculate from the first human being that the Torah, like we said, every historian is going to write the history based on his values, based on his belief. The values of Moshe Rabbeinu, what the Torah is not a history book, because it tells us certain things, doesn't tell us other things. So what is it? It's Moshe Rabbeinu, the historian, telling us the story of the revelation of God in the world. The way Rav Kook used to write the word history, in Hebrew he used to write Hester Ya, with a taf. The Torah is the book of the revelation of godliness in the world. The revelation of God began with a human being named Adam. He was the first human being to have a relationship with God, to be this prophet, to be this holy person, to be this creation. And that's what the Torah is telling. And then the Torah tells us about different types of human beings. Human beings that held the torch of godliness and other ones that didn't. Like you have a fruit and you have a peel. The fruit, the existence of the godliness in the world is Adam, and then Noach, and then Shem, and then Shet, and it goes down to Avram Avinu, Yitzchak and Yaakov, and Yitzchak, Avram, Yitzchak, and then there was suddenly a revolution took place. What was the revolution? God no longer dwelled on individual human beings. It wasn't human beings who held the torch. And by the way, sometimes it skipped a few generations. So it didn't have to be father, son, grandson. It could skip a few generations. But there's a direct, the Moshe Rabbeinu, the historian, who writes that, he rewrites history. He rewrites the whole history of the revelation of God, because now there's the Jewish nation is revealed. And that means that we have to now explain all of history based on this nation that just arrived. So suddenly there's this switch from the godly, the torch of the connection of God being on individuals. Now it happens to be on a nation. It was the first time that Yaakov, there were the whole family. We said till Yaakov there was what we called the peel and the fruit. With Yaakov, everybody is the fruit. And that's why the battles were so strong. Because they thought, like till the end of history, till then, someone's in, someone's out. Yosef is very different. Yosef is not like us. He sees the world different. He has a whole different view. He must be like Esav. He must be like the people that are that are cast out of the history of God. Because if it's not him, it's us. So it better be him, because otherwise it's us. Because there's someone that's in, there's someone that's out. And we know we're holy, and he's strange, he's different. But they didn't know that there was a change that took place. Yaakov was the first time that it was in the family. The whole family. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. No, we're all one. We're all in the same, we're with you. And that's how the nation became from the family to the nation. And that's when the nations took place. So the king is like pretty shocked. And he says, so you have a calculation of the world? He says, yes. From when he wrote the book, which is incredible, we're learning 4,500 years old is the world since Adam. Today it's 5,784. Then it was 4,500. And he says, you have a calculation? He says, yes. 4,500. So he says, and I can prove it to you that the world that we live in, the existence of the world we live in, all comes from Adam. It all begins from Adam. The whole world that we're in right now, it all comes from one, it all funnels back in to one person, Adam. And that's where the world that we live in comes from that person. What's the proof? I have 3 proofs. One is the language. 2 is the weekday, the count that we count 7 days. And 3 is that we count number 10. We use the number 10 as the numbers that we count 1 to 10. The whole world uses these calculations. So in the world of separation, in the world where there's all kinds of confusion, there's a hint that everything goes back to this unity and this oneness. And the king is blown away by the first thing that the rabbi says, that there is no Jew in the whole nation. Everybody agrees on the same calculation. How could that be? That you have a whole nation that everybody agrees on the same calculation. If it was a lie, if it was wrong, if it was, somebody would have said, listen, hey, there's something they tricked you. How could it be that everybody agrees on the calculation? It's a very powerful proof, historical proof. And Moshe Rabbeinu also couldn't lie, because he's giving you names of the people that were descendants, right? The descendants and the names of the children and what they invented and where they spread out. Everything was historical facts. So something that's historical facts, there's cross-examinations. A person goes back. You can't lie about something that's 500 years about. If you make a historical book, when you write the history, and you're writing the history of the last 500 years. If you're lying about something, there's someone's going to say, well, excuse me, you're lying, you made that up. We're talking about 500 years. So that's the one thing, is the idea of this, that there's like a hint in the existence that the world goes back, that this is where the world begins. Yes, there were human beings, some kind of creations before Adam. The Midrash says it. There's no problem to say that there were people before Adam. But they were not godly. Maybe they were some kind of, they know how to paint on walls, because you could see 30,000-year-old paint in there's paintings of people running after animals that are 10,000-year-old in the caves in France. Yes, you wanted to ask something? No. So the rabbi says we have 3 proofs that are here within our existence. 1 is our calculation. 2 is languages. 3, we said. So languages, what are we talking about? So we start with languages. The whole world was one. The whole world spoke Hebrew. The whole world agreed on 7 days, because the world was created in 7 days. The whole world agreed on 10, the number 10, the 10 commandments, the 10 plagues, the 10 Sfirot, the number 10 is the big number, and everyone agreed on that. Then there was a generation that decided to rebel against God. That's called Dor HaPalaga. There was a generation that came, because he asked the king, where do languages come from? Did people sit around and say, let's make a language? No. Where did languages come from? They were just, and actually as they appeared. When did they appear? In this generation of Avram Avinu, when they built the Tower of Babylon, and they all had one language, and they all decided to rebel against God, and then God created 70 languages, and the nations were created, and that was for a positive thing that came out of it after, was that the Jewish nation, in order for it to be the Jewish nation, there has to be nations. So out of the negative thing, something positive came. But that was and there was one person who kept the original language, and that's Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu is called Avraham Ivri because he spoke the language of Ever, and Ever was from Noach, Shem and Ever. And that's what Avram Avinu, it says Ever means to be on one side of the river. The whole world was on the other side of the river, and Avram Avinu was on the other side of the river. He was the only person who was holding on to the original language. That's one. Two, we said the idea of the weekday. How did everybody agree on the weekdays? Why do we count 7 days? Right? From China, from one side of the world to the other side of the world. How could it be that everyone made a decision? Let's pick a 7-day week. Right? That was not a sudden decision. That means that there was a beginning. The fact that it doesn't make any sense. Why should you count a week of 7? Count a week of 10. There's no logical reason that you should count a week of 7.
Does he talk about the moon?
No. Why the moon?
4 weeks. It's basically one kind of cycle.
What do you mean? The moon is 30 days or 28, 29. What does it do with a week? 7 times what?
I think it's the
Right? So he says it can't be that they agreed on it. People that were so far from each other. Right? So that's what it means, that it shows that we all come from this one place of unity. And that's it. And then the number 10 also. How did they come to 10? How did everyone agree on every part of the world agreed to use the number 10? And by the way, there were different calculations that were even better and easier to work with. 12 would be much better. My rabbi is a mathematician, so he's telling you 12 would have been a much more comfortable way to work with as a number. But 10 is 10 generations from Avram to Noach, right? This is these are miracles, right? All of humanity held on to the number 10 as the number. And it's right? God has created the world with 10 sayings, Asara Ma'amarot, and 10 generations, and 10 miracles in Egypt, and the 10 miracles in the temple, 10 commandments. Right? It's the same. It's Hashem is revealed in 10. So now is where we're moving forward. Now we're starting the class. Ve'ech, so we're at number 60 now. Ve'ech, v'amar Kuzari. So now the king questions. So if you say that everybody agrees on the number, the week, then what about the calculation of the year? Why don't they agree on that? No, not everybody agrees the world's 5,874. Here, ve'ech lo yifgom alecha emunatcha. Will this shake you up, your faith? What they say in India, yesh mekomot Islam binyanim uvinyanam vinyanim ubarur etzlam ki yesh lehem me'ot alfei shanim. They have calculations. The world is millions of years old, or hundreds of thousands of years old. You say the world exists this many years. But the people in India, they have a different calculation. Hundreds of millions. So what does the rabbi answer? Amar Chaver, היה זה מפגים על אמונתי, it would shake my faith, אילו נמצא זה באמונה מוחזקת. If these people had some kind of proof or facts or something scientific to base it on, or Sefer, or a book that they agree on. Yes, you have a question?
I don't know. I think it's right that not everyone is counting the same way we're counting. Some people count from some very random dates to us, right? But it's like there are certain significant dates for them that they consider to count years from.
I mean, the Christians count from when Yeshki was born, and the Muslims count from Muhammad or something like that, I think, right?
Or the Mecca or something.
But the big question here and the big discussion here is whether the world was created. You're saying God created the world. We're going to get there in a minute. But so these people say the world is billions of years old. But he says, so you're bringing me these Indians, these people from India. I can't even have a discussion with them because, first of all, they don't have, everyone thinks has a different number. They don't have any book, any scientific proof, right? They all disagree on everyone else. There's no there's no, לא ימצא זה, אומה מופקרת, אין את זה ברור, מכעיסים אנשי דתות, כדברים אלה, מכעיסים אותם, מצלמים עליהם, they're full of idols, they're full of all these different, like, how do you say, like all these tricks and weird things and imagination, right? Witchcraft. And they make fun of anybody who has a book from God. Oh, you have a book from God? Really? They barely have any books. And if you look at the culture they have and the books they have, it's all shallow and very, very low level. נפתע בהם מדעתו קלה, כי קצת ספרי החוברים שכותבים בהם מיני אלפי אלפים, ספרי עבודה נבטית, yeah, they have a book, they say, that comes from the teacher of Adam Arishon. And we know when that book was written. That book was written, says the Moreh Nevuchim, he talks about it. That book was written in the time of Dor HaPalaga. They made it up. It's all nonsense. אמרו קודם אדם ושנבוסר היה רבו של אדם הראשון, דומה לזה. So yes, the people in India, they say the world's millions of years old, but it's not even in the beginning. There's nothing scientific. There's nothing to argue with, right? Nobody checked it. There's nothing to check. There's no proofs. It's just based on fairy tales and all, all kinds of just, at least, in the Christians, the Muslims, they have some kind of calculation. You can talk to somebody, but there's nobody to talk to here. They have no proofs of anything, right? And in idol worshiping, there's different levels. Like we know, Christianity is idol worshiping. There's different levels. The idol worshiping of the idols in India, you're talking of the worst type of idols. At least in Christianity and Islam, the Rambam says that they received from the Torah, so they took their their idol personalities and used a little bit, took some things from the Torah, so at least something came out. It was good also. But these areas, the Torah never came to their areas, are primitive and barbaric, yes, and pagan.
Couldn't you also make the argument that the cultures that borrow from the Torah but are still idolatrous are worse because they mix the Kodesh with that which is important?
The Rambam says, even though they are a filthy funnel, they are still a funnel for the word of God into the world. And I heard from this rabbi, by the way, Rabbi Tuvia Singer, he said that so many, the Christians, they have they spend about $200 million a year to convert Jews to Christianity. And so many of the Jews that end up returning to Judaism comes from because they try to convert them. They end up trying to ask questions and they come back to Judaism. But the idea is they took the Torah. They have the Old Testament. They have the Bible. They believe in it. It's true. The prophets are true. But then came a prophet like Muhammad, and everything else is gone. He's the last one. Everything before him is worthless. But still, it exists. and Christianity. They have the Old Testament. It's all true, but then we have we have something new. But it's still there, so it's filthy, but it's still the word. That's the Rambam says. I don't know much. Like it makes sense what you're saying, but the Rambam says still a lot of good came out of it. Right? So therefore, he says, I can't even take these people seriously. They make fun of everybody, right? Remember, Christianity and Islam, they believe in a connection with God, with the creation, with the creators. But they in the Indian, they like these people in India, zero. There's no existence. There's no connection. There's no God. There's no connection to God. It doesn't exist, right? And we said their literature is low, is shallow, is they barely have literature, and what they do have is like really very low. And therefore, fine. The king says, I agree with you. Fine. You know what? You're right. But, Amar Kuzari, Emor ki ta'anti alech b'oma mufkeret b'am she'enam meskimim al da'at echad. You're right. Nobody agrees on anything. There's no proof. There's no scientific. There's no anything that like really has any substance. There's nobody to talk to. You could just blow them off. You're right. Blow them off, and I agree with you. They're not, what I'm saying? You don't have to, somebody comes to you and says you're a cat. You have to argue with them. Thank you. Have a nice day. It's not even a discussion. But what are you going to say? So I agree with you. You had a good answer. Ma tomab philosophim, but what are you going to say about the philosophers? Vehem kasher hem min hamichkar v'dikduk. No. Philosophers are already, they researched. And they really, did trials and learned about it. Hiskimu al nitzchut v'kadmut, and they agreed that the world always existed. Now, like we said, when it comes to a philosopher who's an intellectual scientist, giving scientific proof, then we have to take it seriously. Therefore, it's going to be a long discussion. It's not just going to say, yeah, look at these, forget about these people. They have all kinds of imaginary stories of how the world is billions of years old and dragons that are flying and, but what are you going to say about the philosophers? It says in the Zohar that the pathways of philosophy were very close to the pathways of faith. Krivin shvilei they're close to the path of faith. And they agree that the world always existed. Now, guy, you have to remember, this discussion is crucial. Did God create the world, or did the world always exist? And by the way, also before, we're talking about the Indians that say the world's billions of years old, or hundreds of millions old, or hundreds of thousands of years old. It's basically saying you are insignificant. Because if we say the world is 5,860 years, and 74 years. No, and 84 years, 5,784. And you have children, you have parents. You yourself will be connected to around 150 years. And in a historical period of 6,000 years, that's very significant. Whatever you're going to do, your effect on the world is very significant and meaningful. It's not just drop in the bucket. The world's billions of years old or hundreds of millions old, and you being here is really worthless. And also saying that the world existed always, it means that there's no God who created the world, and if He created the world, He had a purpose why He wanted the world created. That's why it's so fundamental, the belief of God created the world, and He has a desire that He wants this world to reach. It's not a side thing. The Ramban says this concept of belief of the God creating the world. If you don't believe in that, you don't believe in any of the actual. You don't believe in God. That's what the Ramban writes. I'll read it to you. Tzorach gadol hu latchil et Torah bereshit bara Elohim. That's why the Torah starts with God creating the world. Whether one day means a year or one day means a billion years. But we count from Adam Arisha. And the importance is that God created the world. And the Ramban writes, the Torah had to start with Bereshit bara Elokim, ki shoresh hu shoresh emunah. That's the foundation, the root of our faith. If a person doesn't believe that God created the world, choshev shalom kadmon, and you say that the world always existed, hu kofer ba'ikar ve'en lo Torah klal. That's a person that completely does not believe in God and has no Torah. It's very, very important, and it also places the understanding of there's a creator and there's a created. We are not the creator. We create, but we're not the creators. We don't create. We're not like, we can't create something from nothing. And it makes us know our place and know who we are and be humble and know who we are and what God is. Christianity came and said that the created is a creator. Here's a man and he's God. That's very problematic because you're mixing up between, and that's why the belief of God created the world is very, very important. Okay? So, what do you say about that? והסכימו על נצחות קדמות העולם, ואין זה 10,000 ולא אלפי אלפים, אלא דבר שאין לו תחילה תכלית. They said the world never began, it was always existed. And it has no end and it has no beginning. What do you have to say about that? Okay? A very hard question. They're smart, and they have opinions that were tested, and they all agreed on it. Not only did they not say the world was created, tens of thousands of years ago, they said the world always existed. Okay? And therefore he's going to take it very serious now. He's going to talk about it. In other words, we respect people that work very hard with their brain. They're not lazy, and they really try through trial and error, through chakirot and all kinds of intellectual effort. Can't say that these scientists are worthless and they have nothing to say. They're smart and they investigated. Okay? And by the way, him saying, here the king says that the philosophers investigated and they came to an agreement that the world always existed. First of all, it's not true. Because it's true that Aristotle said the world always existed, but Plato, he said, no, only the material always existed. And then God took the material and created the world out of it. So the material has always existed. And the Rambam says you can believe that and it's okay. It's okay. You can believe that the material always existed, but at some point God took the material, and it means that God has a desire for the world. So you can still be a faithful Jew that has faith and believe that the world always existed. But he took the material and made something out of it. Which is maybe these people maybe are very materialistic. They can't understand that there's no material. That the material doesn't exist. In the end, they're materialistic people. So what's the answer? Amar Chaver. So the rabbi answers. Hafilosofim en leashim otam. Sorry, I can't blame the philosophers. מפני שהם עם שלא נחלו חוכמה ולא תורה, מפני שהם יוונים. I can't blame the philosophers. Aristotle, we're talking here about Aristotle, who was a genius, who was an incredible mind. I can't blame him. Because he was never given Torah. He was never given a godly revelation. Because he's Greek. V'yavan ibnei Yefet ha-shochanim b'tzafon. And Greek, the Greeks they were given, Yavan means noi, beauty. There's Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Shem was the wisdom, he was the connection to God. Cham was, like you could say, the tuma, the impurity, the low levels of existence, of creation. and you had Yefet, which was beauty. And the beauty, Yavan, is the words Noi. Yefet is beauty. It's the same letters, Noi, beauty. And Yefet is beautiful, Yafeh. Their whole thing is the external beauty of the world. And that could go either way. It says, Yishkon, Yefet Yishkon Ba'alei Shem. If Yefet will connect to Shem and use the beauty for positivity, or he could use the beauty for pornography, which is with Cham. So he's like neutral. It's an external beauty, aesthetics. That's his gift. That's his talent. Chochma Yerusha Me'adam. But the wisdom, the Chachma, the ability to learn and to have knowledge was inherited from Adam. Chochma Mechudet B'Kol Elohi, that comes from godly. Enakim Bezer Hashem Shu Sgulat Noach. It was handed on. The wisdom, the Chachma, the godly level of understanding comes to Noach. V'lo paska Chochma v'lo tifsok min Sgula hi Adam. Lo Chochma Yavan. And the Greeks never had this wisdom. But what happened? They became the superpower. They became a superpower. Right away, what did the Greeks do? Quick. We have to have answers for everything. So they took Aristotle, was the greatest genius of our world. Build your school and give us answers for everything, because we have to be the superpower. We have to tell the world that we have to control the world, not only in the physical world, but also in the intellectual world. And we have to have answers for everything. Comes along Aristotle. Where is your intellectual integrity, Aristotle? Where do you come from? Now he came out of nowhere, like you say, a one-hit wonder. You have this philosopher out of nowhere, and there's nobody else but him. And he has to give answers for everything. And he's giving clear answers. When a rabbi doesn't know, he says, Tzarich Iyun, or he says, right, I'm not sure. But here, full of pride, made decisions. Because they were now the superpower. There's no great philosophers in Greeks from the Greeks before they were the superpower, and there's no great philosophers in Greece after they were superpower. One-hit wonder with no past, no future, no knowledge. Until today, no great philosopher came from Greece besides that time. What is this pride for you to come and say? For you to come and say that you have answers for every subject and you know everything. And you're talking about the creation of the world? You have no masoret. You have no, how do you say masoret?
Tradition.
No tradition. There's no, part of the thing of science is trial and error, and you test things. How could you test something? How could you say the world always existed? You can't prove that. Right? They were not given the chachma or religion in inheritance. They have no Masoret, they have no tradition that comes from Adam HaRishon. Everything they started was from zero. Okay, now let's evaluate everything and let's decide on everything. Move quick, because we're now the superpower and we have to make decisions on everything. That's not the way to learn science. That's not the way to evaluate things. Fast, we have to make decisions. We know everything. We have all the wisdom. And where's this pride coming from? Now, this was a positive thing. Positive thing was we're starting from zero. We're not taking anything from the past, as facts or proofs. Everything it's a clean slate. We know nothing from anything in the past, and we're going to make decisions on everything. And they did a lot of good things to get rid of idol worshiping from the world. Right? Because everything was intellectual, has to make sense. And only things that make sense intellectually, and that we can critically, test it or it's out. Okay? They lost something, right? Because what is idol worshiping is just there's zero sechel. So you have one extreme. There's only sech. There's only without any intellectual, without any thinking, without any brains. The other side is only brains. But in the middle pathways, there's brains and there's something above it. Where intellectual effort ends is where faith begins, is where God is able to come into the picture. But it doesn't mean that you get rid of your knowledge and your human ability to think and to ask questions, and common sense is very important, and to test everything else. You can't get everything with your brain. Your intellect is limited. You can't understand everything. There's things that are above. And what's one of the things that are above is how the world was created. That's above. You can't know that from your intellectual knowledge. So we said the philosophers they did not inherit this not wisdom and not religion through inheritance. Their wisdom is not prophecy. It's not Ruach HaKodesh. Right? We're missing it today, but we know we have it. We have it deep down in our national personality. Okay? So we said philosophy, Aristotle, it's the ability to reach very high levels of understanding through effort of your intellect. Everything is from below to above. And prophecy is from above to below. God tells you certain things. Okay? So, let's keep going. The king says, "V'chizeh mechayev shelo na'amin la'aristo b'chokhmato." I don't get what you're saying. Because he has no, how do you say, no proof. No, he has no past heritage or masoret. How do you say? What's the word? Tradition. Because he has no past tradition and no heritage of wisdom, but if he's saying something that's real, he's saying something that's true, then accept it. Right? And it's very interesting. Why shouldn't we believe him? Why does he say faith? Right? He says the word le'amin. Right? So he says we're talking about wisdom here. It's objective. And here, how could you say belief in something that has to do with proof, right? Because we said the philosophers are all about facts and proofs, science, scientific facts. Things are tested. The whole idea of science is that you test something, you test it, and it proves something to you. And so that's why science is always changing. Like one of the important things of science is that it's never this is the way it is. It's something that is always changing. They thought the world was flat. They discovered and now the world is round. Okay, great. So it's always changing. There's always new theories. There was, the theory of evolution, and then there's the theory. I'm saying there's new theories all the time. So basically, what the king is saying here is, yes, I don't know if I'm basing my belief in Aristotle. I haven't learned it in depth, but I believe that he's right. Right? So basically, I am falling to the trap. And this is the big trap, and it's very interesting. He says there's something amazing, Rav Sharki, that the Gemara says, this is the book of Rav Sharki, the Gemara says, he's one of the rabbis here, the Gemara says that you are not, right, bepulmus shel titus gazul shelo yilmad adam b'no yavanit. There was in the Gemara Sota, the 49th page says, you're not allowed to teach your son or your child Greek wisdom. So he says, I don't understand. And one of the Ribash explains, well, obviously you're allowed to teach your son to be a doctor, or, right? Why would the rabbi say you're not allowed to learn astronomy or philosophy? Why can't you learn that? So he says, no. What were they talking about? The Gemara is talking about that there was a certain type of education that the Greek philosophers used to teach. It was called rhetorica. How do you say that?
Rhetoric.
Rhetoric. Rhetoric is the that skill of persuasion. And they used to teach how you could convince people certain things, even though it's a lie. Take a lie and now convince people. And how do you do that? And this is that trait is called the Chachma Yavanit. There's a book, a guy I heard an interview with him. After 5 minutes, I had to stop. He wrote a book called The Art of Seduction, and it's a book where he explains how the human animal, which we are, right? So we're not human beings; we're the human animal, and that we have this ability to learn to take advantage and especially with women, terrible concept. And there's an interview with Ben Shapiro. He didn't. No, sorry. What's the other guy's name? Jordan Peterson. He didn't want to interview him. His daughter said, "Please interview him." So he did it, and he so much didn't want to do it. He's like, "I'm so against everything your beliefs. I didn't want to do it, but my daughter asked me, so I'll do it." I couldn't listen more than 5 minutes because even letting a guy like this talk is so harmful. But this is a trait that's called Chochmah Yavanit. And how does it work? Is that you speak in a way, because you speak so professionally, and you use such great words, that basically a person you use all these. You sound like you're so intellectual and you're so smart and you're so right. You know what you're saying, and you talk with such certainty that you convince, right? Like the style, assertive and convincing, that a person is like, he thinks, wow, this guy's amazing. He's a genius. He must be right. Even he's selling you a complete lie. So that's what he's trying to say to him is, you're falling to that trap. Don't be the Rabbi Levi, the book here, the Kuzari is telling us, don't let the rhetoric and this high language impress you. That, listen to what he's saying. Take the concepts and really listen and argue the concepts. Don't let the external aspects of it blind you and get you away from the actual facts of what is he saying. That's the great thing about our great rabbis. They're able to take all these big ideas and bring them into a simple, understand what it is all about. What is he saying here? This is what he's saying. That's what the Rambam did with the Moreh Nevuchim. He brought down all the theories, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. He cleaned out the whole philosophy, the Rambam in the book Moreh Nevuchim. So he says, Rabbi says, so the king says, listen, come on, you can't blow him off because if he's saying something that's true and it's real and he's bringing proofs, you can't blow him off because he doesn't have any lineage and he doesn't have any past wisdom and hasn't had any there's nothing after him and before him. So he's okay. He's a one-hit wonder, but maybe he said something that was real and they agreed on him. אמר חבר, so the rabbi answers. כן, מפני שהטריחו את שכלו במחשבתו בעבור שלא הייתה בידו קבלה ממי שיאמין בהגדתו. חשב בחירת עולם הסופו. What's the whole idea of a philosopher? It's the science of material, of explaining the things that exist. He couldn't bring his mind to think that there was never anything existed. Right? He couldn't think of it. He couldn't make it. So he wasn't sure. Aristotle himself, if you would have asked him, he would have said, I'm not sure. But he had the pressure from the king. Come on, you have to make decisions. You have to, we have to lead the world, and we have to tell people what's right and what's wrong and what's the facts of creation. And he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure whether, he couldn't, I can understand how it could all begin. And he made a decision. right? He wasn't able to digest the fact that the world was created something from nothing. So therefore, he said the world always existed, right? But that also doesn't make sense. What does that mean? The world always existed. Where did it appear from? Right? The same way, it's hard to understand the fact that the world always existed. You can't understand that intellectually. And you also can't understand how the world suddenly existed. Those are two things that don't make sense. That the world always existed doesn't make sense. That the world suddenly appeared doesn't make sense either. Right? And therefore, and we don't have to be confused. Because we were handed down from Moshe Rabbeinu and all the other prophets that the world was created something from nothing. And therefore, we don't need this childish statement of the world always existed. But he can't reach that with his intellect. So what did he have to say? The world always existed. Because he doesn't have prophecy. So again, he was torn between these two opposites. And Aristotle has no proof for any of them. All right? And therefore, he made a decision. Right? It's like there's a lot of things we don't understand. For example, we know that if you stick your hand into fire, you will burn. But what makes fire, right, be hot? We don't know. What makes fire hot? So the material world needs proofs. But the world above the material world is above proofs. Okay? But again, we're going to talk about this. It's very important. This book gives us the exact right, like we said, when you're learning Tikkun Midot, you're learning how to fix your actions. But when you're learning Amunah, you're learning Musar, you're learning how to fix your action. You're learning Amunah, you're learning to fix your thoughts. What should I be thinking? What's the correct way to think? What's the relationship between what makes sense? The Torah, everything is, how much is it belief on facts? How much is it belief on faith? That's what we're learning here. And so he had this dilemma. Aristotle had this huge dilemma. Did the world always exist, or was the world suddenly created? Why didn't you ask anybody? Ask the people before you. There's people who have answers, who God revealed himself to them. Right? And where did people come from? And if he was a philosopher that came from a nation that received this, we said, inheritance of knowledge, then he could have asked. Right? He's like, yeah, it's also hard to accept the fact the world was created. Right? But when you get something that's handed down from generation to generation, from right? It's something that's that's a powerful proof. Right? From a father to son. These are things that are, right? If the Mount Sinai was a lie, somebody would have said it's a lie. We're talking about things that were handed down, father to son, and from generation to generation. And this is a real powerful proof. So the rabbi says, Amar Kuzari. So the king says, V'chi yesh. Oh, we have to end. Im yesh b'mofet hachra'a titpashet b'sechel. In other words, is this really something you can prove, that the world was created from nothing? That's what we'll go into next week. We'll explain this, the whole idea of the creation of the world. It goes on because we said it's a very deep concept, but we will go on next week. Right? So basically what he's saying, the last thing he's saying here, You say, so how could you say that Aristotle was going by his emotions or his tendency? He's bringing logical proofs. How could you push that off? There's facts. So then we're going to go in next week that, like we said, it's really 50-50. It's not real. He didn't have proofs. But we'll explain it, and we're going on and on about this concept. It's a deep concept, and it takes a little bit longer for us to discuss the whole idea of, and then we go into the concept of miracles. Where do miracles fit into the world? All right, thank you.